Hey everyone, and welcome to another Kirby video. In this video I want to build navigation with you, menus basically. And I think it's a great topic to cover a few things here and there. So let's just get started. I haven't set up anything yet, so I'm really starting from scratch with this one. And I'm going to use our command line interface, which you can find in our brand new plugin directory to install the Plainkit. And I will install it into a navigation folder. And now I should be up and running with the Plainkit. As you can see, it's the same old thing, pretty basic. And it's a perfect starting point to show you a few of those ideas that I have around menus. So let's get in there. And I want to stay on the content level first and just build a basic site for a fictional hotel. When we think about the architecture of a site, the nice thing about the file system is that it gives us that tree-shaped structure that we most of the times need for our menus anyway. So we have this option to nest things indefinitely to build main menus and submenus and submenus and so on. And this is exactly where we will be starting here as well. So I will create the main pages first. So let's just say this hotel is going to have rooms, obviously, and it's also going to have a nice gallery, and it is going to have a spa area maybe, and maybe some activities. So I really like to sketch the structure of the site first and then think about how this could be built into HTML. And let's just stay on the main menu level first. How would I turn this into a menu? Because the most easiest way to approach menus is to use what we already have, to use the folders and the content that we already have. Let's quickly open this up in the code editor and head over to our default template. I'm going to stay in the default template for now. I'm not going to make this more complicated. Let's create a simple HTML document and put this in here. And what I will do is I will have a header, and in my header there would probably be the logo in there, and then I will have a menu. And let's build the first menu. I did this in a previous video right in the beginning of the basic series, but I think it's good to repeat this. So now I want to create list items for each menu item, and inside I want to have links basically to each subpage. How can I do this? This is super easy because now we already have our main menus set up, our main pages set up in the content folder. We can get to them by using for each loop, take our site object, and from the site object we take the children, and for each child, we only want the listed ones. Let me quickly go back to the content folder. In Kirby we have this differentiation between listed and unlisted pages. The ones with the sorting number are the listed ones, and the ones without a sorting number are the unlisted ones. And we can use this. The sorting numbers help us to, sort pages, and it also helps us to, differentiate between different types of pages here. So those would be my main menu items that I want to have in my main menu, and I really don't want to have those in the main menu. So listed and unlisted already is a great way to filter this and only get the ones that we want here. So I have my for each loop, and I'm calling each item in that for each loop item. The only thing that you have to be aware of is that you don't call those page, because then you get in conflict with the global page variable. That would be the only thing that I would recommend. But other than that, you could call this menu item or whatever you feel like. And so for each menu item, or for each item, we want to print the title and also the URL. So that's super basic, but that's all we actually need. So if we open this up in the browser, we get exactly what we want. We get our main menu items, and we get links to the pages which we can already use. All those are still lowercase because so far we haven't put any text files in them. So Kirby will take the folder names as the title for each page here. And so far this is just a great way to create an outline, to build this in a really simple way without thinking too much about the content so far. Okay, cool. So we have a main menu, and this is really handy because now we can use our sorting numbers to sort stuff around. So if we feel like the rooms should be on 2 and the gallery should be on 1, we could change them and the menu will update as soon as we reload. This is cool and really nice and easy to get started with. But from here on, it gets a bit more interesting. What do we want to achieve next? So let's say our spa area has certain sub areas. So there would be like a pool, and then there would be, this is going to be a fancy hotel. There would be a sauna and I don't know, massage area or whatever. So how do we display those? We have to turn those into a sub list now. How can we do this? From an HTML perspective, the markup would look like this basically. So we could repeat this. By the way, I'm using the menu element here. I really start to like this a lot because it is so semantic, but you can totally use your unordered lists or ordered lists here, whatever you prefer. And then this would totally repeat here. So it would look something like this, and we would need another for each loop. So that's kind of the markup that we need to build. And how do we get the sub pages now? The sub pages for each item in the menu. We can use another for each loop and let it look like this, wrap it around the list element. But of course this won't work because this will only repeat the main items again. So we could do this for fun and just see what it does. But well, of course it does not produce the kind of results that we were looking for. So going back to the template, I somehow need to get the children of the item. Well, that's basically all I need to do. I need to get the children for each item, and I also want to take the listed ones again. So in case there would be unlisted ones, we could still filter those out and make sure that only the sorted ones, the ones with the sorting number, are included in this list of items. One thing we have to do now though is to rename that variable because that could be colliding with the one above. So I call it sub item and use sub item here and sub item here. That should do the trick already. Let's go back. Yes, it's doing exactly what we want. We get a nice sub menu for each of the areas in our spa, and we could totally use this for the rooms as well. So let's say we have a standard room and we have a superior room, and then this would be the categories for the rooms that we provide in the hotel. This is cool. It's working exactly like I want it to work, and it's a perfect foundation now for some sort of styling. So I could turn this into a hover menu for each item in the list. I could apply some CSS where the sub list then would only show as soon as I hover over it. Another option that I have, or that I want to try out, is that the submenu only shows as soon as I'm on the main category. So as soon as I click on rooms, the room categories should be shown. And as soon as I click on spa, the spa areas should be shown, and otherwise those should be hidden. And as I said, this could be done with CSS, or it could be done with JS, for example. If you want this to do this on the client side, then you would still need the entire list and all the sub lists to be rendered in there. But you could also do this on the server and say, okay, only give me those sub items as soon as I'm in that area. How can we do that? Well, we can wrap the menu part in an if clause. I'm going to talk about the if clause in a second. I'm going to do this first. And then we somehow need to find out, well, the first thing I want to solve here is, so far we render the menu element for every item in the main menu. For every list item here would automatically get a menu, and this is something that we totally don't want, because there might be items in the menu that don't have subpages, for example gallery or activities yet. So we want to filter this out and not create some markup that we don't want. That would be our first task, which this if clause helps with. So we can do a little query to find out if an item has children. So there is one method called hasChildren. That would be pretty obvious. And this would already work. We could do this now and see that, well, we don't see anything, but if we go into the markup, we can see that this has no longer a menu sub element here. But it isn't perfect, because what would happen now is if there are unlisted children, it would still show up. And what we want to do is to make sure that it only appears if there are listed children. So we can extend this and say, does this item have listed children? And now it should always work, no matter if there are listed or unlisted items in such a page. So that is the first step to make sure that the markup is always clean. And now as a next step, I want to make sure that those sub items only appear if I'm in rooms or if I'm in spa, and otherwise they would be hidden. How can we do that? Each page, well, the item here is a page object. Each item here is a page object. Each sub item is also a page object. And the page object has another method called isOpen, which we can use. So we can say, tell me, is this item open? Is this page currently open? And only if this is true, and only if it has some listed children, then it would print this submenu of items here. Let's see what that does. So we are now in the spa area, and the spa subcategories are shown. And if I click on rooms, only the room categories are shown. So this is exactly what I wanted to achieve. This is happening on the server. It's not client-side. It's not done via CSS or JavaScript. It's rendered in PHP. And I can pretty easily control the markup for the menu like this, which is nice. This is especially useful if you think about a site structure that is very big. So if you have like our docs, for example, which have lots of categories and subcategories, it would be pretty harmful to create the entire markup for the entire menu and then always keep it expanded, or always have it that the entire markup in your HTML. So it's far better to make sure that it's only appearing as soon as you click on that category. That would be one step. There is isOpen, and isOpen means that it applies as soon as you are on that page. So if we are on the spa page, the subpages will be shown, but if I click on a subpage of it, it will still be open. That means it will also apply if any of the children or any of the grandchildren or grandchildren are open. This is important because there are two methods which you can use. The one is the isOpen method that we already use, or the other one would be isActive. IsActive only applies if the current page is open. So if you are on a child or on a grandchild, it won't be applied. So it's important in a menu to use the isOpen method to make sure that no matter where you are in the structure, deep down in one of the grandchildren, this would, in one of the grandchildren, it would still be open. Otherwise, you click on pool and then the submenu would disappear, which is not really ideal. It would feel pretty weird. Okay, great. So we have a great structure for our menu here. One way we can extend this now further. So let's say a typical use case for this would be that you want this to expand even further. So for example, our pool area is now separated into certain pools because it's a really fancy hotel, or there would be different saunas or something, and we want to create more submenus that go even deeper. Let's just simulate this with, well, maybe we have a Finnish sauna, and then we have an Alpine sauna, and a Roman steam bath or whatever. So now we also want those to show up in our menu. But at this point, it starts to get messy because we would need to replicate all of this again. We could totally do this. We could copy all of this and then put it inside here, rename everything again, make sure it's called correctly, and then yeah, it would work, but you can't do this indefinitely. If you think about menu that would expand even more levels, you get to this point where you feel like, okay, this is no longer a good approach, not a clean approach at least. So let me clean this up a bit and show you how we can make this even better. Because we can turn all of this into a snippet. So let's take the inner part here, this one. This is kind of the core of our menu. We have a menu item, we have list items, and we have for each loop for each item. That is kind of what the menu really looks like. And if I cut this out and if I put this into a snippet, and I call it menu, we can take this as a perfect starting point for a pretty useful menu snippet. So with the snippet, all I have to do now is to make sure that this definite list of items here is turned into a variable. And I also don't want to call them sub item, I want to call them item. Okay, now we have something that is totally universal that we can apply in many places. We pass items to our snippet, and then the snippet would render the list items for us together with the links. Let's see how we can apply this here. Put the snippet in here. Nope. So we can now pass items into this, and we already have our items here, so we can copy this, put it here, and cut this out. We don't need it because this is now coming from our snippet. It's already looking a lot cleaner. It should have the same result. It works great. It still works as expected. But we can even go one step further, because we can totally do the same structure again that we did for our main menu or for the level above. So if we go into our menu snippet, we can take this entire code here and put a submenu in here and say, okay, if the item is open, if the item has listed children, use this same snippet again. We can use recursion with snippets. Snippets can include themselves again to nest stuff indefinitely. Well, indefinitely wouldn't be good, because then you would end up with an endless loop. But in this case, it stops at the point when there is no longer any submenu available. So this is nice, because this will now also solve our problem that we have another level that we need to take care of. And this means that we can put this entire snippet on the first level and take that set of items and pass it to our menu and get rid of all of this. So we pass our menu snippet the first set of items. It goes through those items. For each item, it looks like it looks at the children. It looks if there are additional listed children. It will go through those children, put them into another submenu, and if there is another level of submenu items, then it will repeat and repeat forever and ever, basically. The menu stays the same, nothing changed, but now what we should be able to do, or what we should be able to see, is our submenu. So now, as you can see, we have our sauna areas. So we have our Finnish sauna and our Alpine sauna, our Roman sauna. And this is awesome because we can totally reuse this for everything else. For the rooms, maybe the rooms have different sub pages, or the gallery has certain galleries and sub-galleries and sub-sub-galleries. So this is super, super useful for a lot of site types, especially like more complex sites. Documentation, as I said before, is a typical use case where you have lots of levels that nest indefinitely, potentially. Cool. So now we have our main menu, we have our submenus. We can deal with the idea to render them based on whatever is happening on the server. So if a site is open or not, we could still go into your main menu snippet here and remove this part if you prefer to have everything in one huge tree. If you think like this is the better approach to put it everything into the markup and then style it or apply JavaScript to it, still totally possible. That's the nice part about it now. We have to only change one little thing in one little snippet and it will propagate throughout the entire items in our tree menu. This is great, and as I said before, it's a perfect way to start with what you already have. We can outline our structure, we can easily prototype it here, and then turn it into a menu and use it, go on like this quite far. This can take us quite far. But then we get to a point in a project where we feel like, okay, now I need an additional menu, for example, for the footer. I could still totally reuse the menu that we have in the header and put it in the footer as well. Sometimes it's nice to have the main navigation repeated in the footer again, but sometimes or oftentimes you will turn up at that point where you feel like, I really need an additional menu that is not really coming from my content structure. So I have a list of pages that aren't in here yet or aren't in a perfect structure that I could use for this. Typical example would be something like a legal menu or like a typical miscellaneous menu of items that you have to list, like the typical pages that we all don't really like. Something like the contact page and the legal stuff page and the privacy page, privacy or however you pronounce it, and then also terms. Yeah, just the typical stuff that goes into the footer somewhere, and you rather don't mention them at all, but they have to be there. And we don't want to apply sorting to them because we don't want to appear them in. Don't want them to appear in the main menu. How do we get them into our site now, or into our template? That's the tricky question. So going back to our template, let's build a basic footer, and this is where the menu should appear. And of course, one thing you could totally do is to hard code the HTML for it. That would be one way. We can use our snippet menu again, but now we need to pass a different kind of list to it. We need to find a different way to get those items that we want to have in the menu. How do we do this? Kirby has a great little helper tool which is called Pages. Wait, I'm mixing up the syntax here. So there is a helper method called Pages, and Pages helps us to get a bunch of pages. There is the page helper, which helps us to get to a certain page. So for example, we could get the room page, but that would return only a single page object. And our items is expecting a list of pages. So it wants 1, 2, whatever, many pages in a collection, in a page collection. It can't work with a single page. So this is where Pages helper helps us. And the Pages helper needs to be used like this. So you pass an array to it, and that array is a list of IDs for your page, for your pages that you want to have in the collection. And the IDs are by default the folder names or the nested folder names. So for example, if I want to get the contact page, it would simply be contact. If I want to have the rooms page, it would simply be rooms without the sorting number. If I want to have the standard page, it would be rooms/standard. So that is the way how our basic IDs work in Kirby. And this is great because now I can pass in all the pages that are kind of randomly flying around in my main content folder level, and I want to apply them, or I want to put them into this footer menu. So that would be contact, and it would be privacy, and it would be, what did I have? Terms and legal stuff. And I can handpick them. It's totally fine. If you feel like, okay, you are in control as a developer, your customer will probably never really get back to you and change that order. that is the fastest way that you can do it. Let's see how it works, because that would be pretty good if it works at all. So yeah, you can see we get our footer menu just as we want. And we can click through it. It's still working. It is working because of the logic in our menu snippet. None of those pages have subpages. If those had subpages and we don't want to display them here, you would have to build a different kind of list here for them, but you could still use the pages section to get them first and then build a for each loop around them. As I said, this is totally fine if you are in control and you don't have to change this a lot, or your customer never will change it at all, then it's totally fine. As soon as you are at the point where this should be editable, it gets a bit more tricky, because now you need to find a way to put this into the panel somehow. And this is the next step that I want to show you. How do we get this into an editable format? The first thing that I want to look at is where do we store it? Because that is the biggest question. Where should this go? This is global data. It's not specific to a certain page. It should appear on any page in the footer. So that is the first important decision to make. Where do we put this kind of data? And the typical place to put this would be the site.txt, because that is where you store global data in Kirby. So I'm going to open this, and I'm going to create a new field, which I call footer, or you could call it footer menu if you find this a bit more clear. And then what I can do is I can copy, well, I do this manually, it's faster. So I would have contact and privacy and terms and legal stuff. I just do the same list here. This is YAML, even though it looks just like a plain text list, but this is basically understandable by the YAML parser, so it's a perfect format for us to have an easy format to edit and to administrate. And we can pass this easily in Kirby as well, and this is what I'm going to show you now. So if I'm going here, I want to replace this PHP array with the data that I just put into the site.txt. And we can remove the entire pages helper actually. And if I want to access global data, just like with the children on the main level, I can use the site object and then get the fields of the site object that are stored in the site.txt. So it's called footer menu. I prefer to turn this into a lowercase, but then use camel case for the way to write it. It doesn't really matter. So all your content fields are not case sensitive. You could do it like this. You could totally put it into lowercase. That's the only thing that you have to care about. You can't do this, of course, because we used footer menu. Otherwise, we would need to do this. But this is the format that I prefer. And the footer menu field, or any field in Kirby, has a field method called toPages. And what does this do? It uses such a YAML list of IDs and passes the YAML, and then turn this list of IDs into a collection of pages. That's all the magic that it does for us. And the great part is it will go through those pages and it will ignore those that don't exist. So this should turn into exactly the same thing that we already had, if I am not mistaken. Yes, exactly. So you can basically think of the toPages method like the pages helper applied to a field. That's kind of it. And the great thing that we already have now is that we have a really easy list to edit. So we can move stuff around, and it will move around here as well. So we can change the order pretty quickly, and we can add pages. So for example, if we feel like the rooms should be in here as well, the rooms appear here as well. So this is really cool. And as I said before, if there is a page in here or a page ID that doesn't exist, it doesn't really matter because it is simply ignored. So we can safely put stuff in there, and if it exists, it will be included. If it doesn't exist, it won't be included. This is cool. We can put simple IDs in here, or we could put our UIDs in here to have even more reliable references to the pages that we want to work with. And this is not just a great way to work with such menus, it's also a great way to add related data to pages. So for example, if you work on a blog article and you want to link to related blog articles, you can totally use the same method and the same kind of list style to link to related articles here. Okay, but that is just a side note. We are focusing on menus now, and this is great because we already have a content structure that is at that point where we can now focus on how to set this up in the panel to make it editable. If I go to the panel, I haven't installed it yet, so this is the first step that I need to do. Install it. I get to our very basic Plainkit setup with just the pages on our dashboard. I could totally make this nicer from here, but I want to focus on this particular field because now we want to have a way to edit this field for our site. So I need to go to my blueprints, and I can, whenever it is about storing stuff in a site.txt, I have to focus on my site.yml file as well to set up fields for my site. Global fields that would be stored then in the site.txt. I already have this pages section here which displays my pages, so I can put another content section here, for example, and I want to create a field, so I need the fields section. I have been asked this before after the last video about those names in your blueprints. So those are keys here, section names. You can choose them on your own. Those are not defined by Kirby. You can choose this part here. The rest is, the options have to match whatever you want to set up, but you can give your sections the names that you want. The only thing that is important, if you create multiple sections, the keys have to be unique. So if you put pages here and pages here, you can see it already lights up. It won't work because the first one will then be ignored and you just won't have a fields section. It will just be skipped or basically replaced by the second one. So we have to come up with a unique name for this. I call it content, and here I want to put a field that can edit those pages that I set up in the site.txt. For this, I will create a field that matches the name here. So I can copy this. Again, this is the same thing that I just talked about in the template. This is case insensitive. So if you want to keep it like this, that's totally fine. Keep it like this, also totally fine. It just has to match with what is ending up here. Kirby will then turn it into uppercase first. This is just a convention that we built into it. So the fields in the text file will always be uppercase first and then camel case afterwards. So this is fine, or this is fine. I'm preferring it like this. Okay. What kind of type of field do we need to edit our pages in that list? We need a pages field. The pages field is a relation field, a relationship field. So there's a lot of confusion about pages sections and pages fields, and I'm trying to explain this a bit better. What I did in the site.txt is to store a bunch of IDs of pages that already exist. And this is exactly what the pages field does. It can take pages that we have in our site and store it in a field and give it to me like in this list, and then I can turn it into a list of pages again. It is a very flexible way of selecting pages. So for example, if I click here, I can now select additional pages, the gallery, for example, and maybe the activities, and also put them into this list. And I can also toss stuff around here. And if I save it, that list will then be stored. This is a bit confusing now because the panel always stores them as UIDs. You can change that behavior, but by default it will do this. So it will store a reference to the unique ID of each page. But it doesn't really matter. The plain text IDs, as I put them first, also work. Both ways work. But this is just something that you have to keep in mind. The panel will create this list of IDs of pages for you. It's just a list of ID of pages. That's what I wanted to say. On the other hand, the pages section that we have down here is all about creating folders. That's the big difference. One is storing IDs and the other one is creating pages or managing the folders in your content folder. So this one is creating the pages and this one is referencing the pages. Those are the differences between the pages field and the pages section. The same applies to the files section and the files field. So we also have a files field which can store references to certain files. All of those are relationship fields. The pages field, the files field, and the users field. They don't create data, they only reference data. And they are perfect for this because we don't want to recreate a contact page. We only want to reference it and say, okay, this page goes into the footer, this page goes somewhere else. Exactly. So it is a really cool field to build quick menus like this. So we can easily have such references. And then, as I showed you in the example before, turn this into a menu like we did in our template. So as I said, it's really the ideal field to build menus. And the cool part is it does not have to be just one of them. If we feel like we have a secondary footer menu, or we have an additional header menu, or we have a login menu, or what I don't know, any kind of menu that you might want in your site project, you could do it like this. You could add additional fields and reference different pages there. Just to give you an example, let's say we have a login menu or a user menu, something like this. It would start with an empty field now. So there won't be any pages in there, and I can now start to add additional pages to that. And I would just get an additional field that would store additional references for additional pages inside here. Let's remove this because we don't really need it, just as an explainer. Okay, great. We could stop here because the purpose is already solved, or the task is already solved. We have a main menu that is very flexible, and we have additional options to create submenus, which are also super flexible. One thing that I want to talk about is how can we make our site YAML a bit nicer, because the Plainkit isn't really showing off here. If you want to have better examples of dashboards or like better panel setups, you should check out the starter kit or the demo kit, or look at kirbysites.com for examples of really nice panel setups. But I want to show you a bit about how we can make this nicer. Ideally, if you get to this page, this is the dashboard where you end up. If you log in as a user, you see this is the first thing you see. And the idea behind is that we give like a really good entrance point for your editors to find content. So you get to your pages, you might see some stats about your site, or you might have like different lists of pages to get to your posts quickly, or to get to certain areas of your site really quickly. So you would focus on that while setting up the site.yml. And such settings, I don't feel like they should be on the main page here. Well, they could. If the footer menu is super important, they could be, but I feel like the footer menu is data that you need to care about once or twice, maybe a year or something, if you want to care about the fine detailed content structure of your footer. But otherwise it will stick in some corner somewhere and you'd hardly ever need it. And we have something for this which is perfect, which is called tabs. So we can separate our blueprints, our page views, into certain tabs. So what I would do here is to create an overview tab, and I would put our pages in there. And then I would have a secondary tab that only has the footer field. That was wrong. Sometimes mix this up as well. But this is still, okay, this is not a good example how you should edit your blueprints. But what you basically do with tabs is you create new tabs and then you put sections in those tabs, or columns. You can also work with columns in there. So you can separate sections into different tabs. This is what I'm doing. Again, the name is important. You have to choose a unique name, but the rest is up to you. You can choose your own names here. The names will be turned into labels for those tabs, as you will see in a second. And then you can put any kind of sections in each tab. And the result will look like this. So we now have an overview tab and we have a settings tab. And this is exactly what I wanted to do. I wanted to spread this out into two different areas where I can focus on the overview of the pages and have like a really clean list of stuff that I want to focus on first if I log in, and then get more into detail if I need to. And this would be an additional great space for more site settings, something like search engine optimization settings, or I don't know, if you have like certain theming settings or something, this would be the perfect tab to work on this. What we can do with tabs as well is we can label them ourselves, so we don't have to rely on whatever Kirby's turning our names into. So this is the overview. Well, this is a bit silly, but you get the idea. If we don't want Kirby to turn the name into the label for the tab, we can override it here. More importantly, we can apply icons, which I think are sometimes really helpful to clean the design up for our tabs. So now I have a pretty nice starting point here to put stuff into certain parts. And I can have many of those. If your site is starting to get really complex, just create more tabs to make sure that it's still all manageable and put in the right place. Just keep it tidy. Good. I think this is what I wanted to achieve. I wanted to show you how to build more complex menus, how to have more independent menus and administrate them as well, how to turn stuff into recursive snippets and have a bit of fun with it, and also little details about how to improve your panel setup for such stuff like this. I hope you liked it. It is such a cheesy thing to do, but hit the subscribe button if you like those videos. Leave us a comment. I'm always glad to hear your opinions. Leave us wishes as well. It's super helpful to get more wishes for new videos. I'm looking for new topics here to find ideas for what I could build next. And then see you next time. Thank you very much. Bye bye.